Welcome to another episode of The Corner Booth, the official podcast of restaurantowner.com. Today, the restaurant industry is changing faster than ever. Learn from successful independent restaurant operators and other industry leaders as they share best practices that will help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.
And welcome everyone to another Corner Booth. I am Chris Tripoli, and I'm thanking you for taking some time to visit with me. And we're going to talk about another topic of an interesting concept from inception through operations, growth, even internationally. We're talking about Talking Tacos. Talking Tacos, a Florida-based concept. And I have for you today to share the whole story, Mohammad Farraj. Mohammad is the co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer. Mo, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to visit with all of us here on Corner Booth.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So listen, you've got an exciting concept, and I know I want to hear all about how it operates and the exciting international expansion. But before we do that, maybe you could tell the listeners just a little bit about you. We're always interested in learning about how people get started, what your early influences were, what got you into this business anyway.
Absolutely. My name is Mohammad Farraj. I was born and raised in South Florida, in an area called Hialeah. We grew up on, our financial means weren't as good, and that kind of led me to take on a almost 50-hour week job at the age of 13. That built certain qualities and traits within me that I believe nurtured into what allows me to be able to do what I do today. I learned many lessons along the way. I got my college education in South Florida. I then went on to become a dentist, after which I then specialized in facial trauma, oral maxillofacial surgery. And it was in my last year of dental school that Talkin Tacos came to existence, and it was the moment that changed my life. So I moved to New York for 2 years to complete my residency. I ended up cutting that residency short to come back to Florida and jump in a food truck to sell tacos.
Wow.
I come from a very large family. I have 7 brothers and 6 sisters. That also plays a factor into how, you're raised, and I'm very grateful for them. I've learned many, many things. I've got to avoid a lot of mistakes in my life because of that older mentorship. So,
well, that's wonderful. I mean, getting busy and when you're in your early teens, learning valuable lessons, like you pointed out, developing that worth ethic. Now, I have heard of many people who specialized in something first, but left because of their love for this industry and wanted to open up a business. But I don't think we've had somebody who was a dentist and while working in their residency decided, nope, I'm going to go home and do a food truck. This is a first.
Yeah. No, the story is really interesting, actually. I think it's a good time to kind of jump into it and
sure.
Brief
so you're back in Florida now, and you have a food truck. And so does this then become the concept of Talkin Tacos?
It is. So early on, the food truck came into existence. I had a friend of mine who had 2 food trucks. This was at the height of COVID. He ended up shutting them both down, and he was telling me that he wants to put them up for sale. And so I said to him, why would you sell the food truck? Let us open up something. And he came on to be my co-founder, and we founded what was once Talkin Tacos. Taco About It. This was the first name before we had to change it for trademark purposes.
Sure.
We ended up sticking to Talkin Tacos. So this was around June of 2020. This was my 3rd year of dental school. My life was very hectic. I had just recently gotten married. I was having a daughter, and I thought, hey, this would be a great way to make a couple extra $100 a month to kind of support my daughter and my wife. Um, the food truck came into existence we actually opened up for business in September of 2020. And we ended up, the beginning, the food truck in its early days wasn't really promising. There was no future in sight for the business that we were building. We were selling at best 8 meals a day, and those were from, people just walking by who saw a food truck and, were willing to buy a plate. So
Sure.
2 months in, I was working my job, going to school, just to be able to cover the expenses of the chef that we had hired at that time. And one day we caught a lucky break. A young 14-year-old girl came to the food truck, recorded a video that just had no reason to blow up the way it did and go viral. That young girl posted the video. The next day, the chef is calling me, freaking out. Mo, where are you? Where are you? And I'm like, what's going on, chef? And he's like, get over here now. And I'm like, what am I going to? What's the rush, And he would proceed to tell me, we have a line of 100 people down the block. And I'm like, are you sure you're on the right truck? I mean, you sure you're not on the wrong truck? Because that's not us. So I go up, I pull up to the food truck, and I see this enormous line of people wrapped around the block. And I walk up to them and I say, thank you so much for coming, but what brought you here? And they would tell me, you guys went viral and we're here, right? And so a part of that was,
a 14-year-old food blogger with a great post.
Yeah. But unfortunately, we only had enough food for 10 people because we were only preparing for what we were selling,
Yeah.
So we had to break that news to them. We were also the first to bring birria tacos to the South Florida food scene, and that played a big factor in that virality, and people wanted to come check it out. It was a new concept. It was a new thing for us Floridians, and that was the beginning of our journey. 6 months later, April 2021 came along. We ended up signing our first lease. We took over a restaurant that was, it was a Jamaican chicken restaurant, and the owner wanted to exit. And so we said, okay, well, we'll take over the restaurant, no problem. And that was the beginning. That is when Talkin Tacos went from a piece of steel and 4 wheels to a brick and mortar with a full operation.
What a story. Oh, this has got some great elements, obviously, starting with the food truck, not promising, very slow, the power of a blogger's, post. But then, of course, growth into the industry. Your first one is a retail space that was previously a restaurant, so you take over. That's a good point. I know a lot of people are looking for and taking advantage of second generation spaces. And so in 2021, that's what you did, and that's how the first Talkin Tacos became brick and mortar.
Yep. That actually was our strategy that we utilized to kind of grow from one location to up until 23 locations. We had not signed on a single full build out vanilla shell lease. Okay. Every single location that we opened was a second generation or kind of a location that we bought from the owner and they vacated if that's what they wanted. And that was our strategy. It's a lot faster, a lot less costly, and you can get a lot done with that strategy.
Absolutely. Yes. And we're going to want to talk a little bit more about that strategy and how you found those locations. But paint a picture now for what Talkin Tacos is, the hours of operation, size, the style of service, for example, hours of operation, that kind of thing.
So one of the things that we noticed very early on was that a lot of restaurants close at 10 p.m. and a lot more people are awake after 10 p.m. And they had a handful of options, and those were all fast food and not really anything of quality. So we decided to extend our hours of operation until 2 a.m. at every single location. Today, that comprises of 30 to 40% of our business between the hours of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Um, in addition to that, we have some locations that open up until 6 a.m. And those locations are more in the downtown areas, nightlife, the party scene is there. And so people tend to be in those areas a little later. We have a philosophy, and that philosophy is no money gets left on the table, right? So if we have to open up a little later, we'll get that done.
Interesting, very interesting. So we have late night as a basic basis of the concept. That also is going to be driving the type of locations that you want to select. I get it. But it can comprise 30% of your total revenue, those late night hours, you say.
Yeah, yeah. So they're 4 hours out of a 15 hour daily,
Sure.
service. And it has become a monumental factor in our business. In addition to, I mean, forget if you just think about it. If somebody at night is looking to, find some good food around them and they end up finding Talking Tacos, well, they're likely to come back in the daytime, right? They have been exposed to you, they have found out who you were,
Right.
and tasted your food. So it's a good marketing tactic in addition to just sales.
Yes, sir. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that menu offering. What are the, say, price ranges and what are the items that you offer?
So Talking Tacos, when we first started, it was the core focus was tacos. We had tacos, and that was really it. As we grew into our first brick and mortar, we decided to expand the menu a bit. We introduced burritos, we introduced rice bowls and taco salads, in addition to desserts and drinks. But to focus a little bit more on the star key items, and that is our tacos. Our tacos are specialty tacos. We're not a Tex-Mex concept, but we're not authentic in the sense that we are following the traditional components that you would find in a Mexican restaurant in the heart of Mexico.
Sure.
We've combined flavors that we've thought that the food scene around us would appreciate and enjoy, and that's I like to consider it almost like a some sort of Asian influence into the concept, from the sauces um, and just a cool additions that we have. So our star item is the birria taco. That is a slow cooked braised beef that is just marinated for almost 12 hours. It's served with what we call a consommé, and that is the broth itself that it was cooked in. And it's as simple as tortilla, cheese, the beef, and onions and cilantro. So that is roughly 30% of what we sell. That birria taco is our specialty item, and people love it. But in addition to that, we have other items that we kind of appeal to people who may not appreciate tacos as much, and that's kind of how the menu came about today. It's an extensive menu. We have roughly 60 menu items, all in all, and yeah.
Good. So that does sound a little larger than I was thinking. I mean, there's no surprise. Tacos is a specialty. Obviously, it works really well with the burrito, the rice bowl, some salads, drinks, desserts. I get it. But you totaled it up at 60 items. So that's a fairly good offering.
Yeah, the if I could add, we've used this trick of kind of combining components that you would find in the tacos would be the same components in the burritos, so it doesn't take up a
Sure.
lot more space in the restaurant.
No, it's a great idea. Cross utilization. I'm sure everyone's making a note of that. How to make your menu look broader, more variety, but operationally, you're doing a lot of cross utilization, so you're efficient. That's great. What does the size of the space need to be for you to do the on-site prep service? Is there inside seating and outside seating? I'm just trying to get a picture for your units.
Yeah, so our spaces are typically between 1,700 to 2,500 square feet. Again,
Hmm.
we can't really be as picky because our strategy thus far has been second generation locations, and that has you can't really have you don't really have full control of the space and the layout. But our spaces are typically between 1,700 and 2,500 square feet. Our ordering system is kiosk based. So in COVID, we had a very difficult time with finding good team members who can play the cashier role, and that would be giving customers the best experience that they could possibly give them. We would get complaints, and we had no outlet to be able to replace them because it was COVID.
Yeah.
And so at that time, we made a decision to go kiosk based. What we realized was that that solved two crucial problems for us. And I'll add a third right after. But the first was it allowed customers to not only just hear what is on the menu, but it allowed them to see every single item that they're looking at. So now a customer can visualize the food that they're about to order. They can get a sense for if they would like it or not. And the second thing that allowed us to do was the customer was in full control of how they place their order, right? So they can customize it to their liking. They can remove toppings without, the cashier doesn't have to, the cashier won't forget that they didn't want cilantro or onions, right? And the third thing, a computer can't really give you attitude. You know what I mean? So
I get it. Well, and it's getting more and more common for people to accept the use of technology, in their face, the way we order kiosks. I hear what you're saying. Is there any personal contact after that? If I order at the kiosk, do I then do what? I go pick up my food, or does someone run it to the table? How does that work?
yeah, so we didn't want to make the experience for the customer completely contactless and humanless. So every one of our restaurants will have a host that stands by the kiosk. He or she is greeting the customers. They are answering questions. They are going over the menu with customers. They're interacting. They're giving the customers that human feel. Um, and so the customer doesn't really feel the effect of not having a cashier because there's a human who represents the company that is there waiting to greet them and speak to them.
Good.
Once the order is placed, the customer would sit down. Appetizers and drinks are served first. We run the food to their table. We then follow with the main entrees. We bring that to them as well. And customers are not picking up after themselves. We are cleaning up after the customers. And so it's not necessarily a fast food experience. It's more of a a a fast casual service, where the food is getting delivered to you. The only
Sure.
difference is we don't have servers and we don't have cashiers.
Exactly. So instead of that full service, you are still delivering. So it's more of that limited service. And I think that works well. So I like the point that you made. So you're still getting a little eyeball to eyeball. You have that greeter who's working around the kiosk. So there's someone to show appreciation, thanks, some suggestive selling. All that I think really works. And then the food is run. So tell me then, is it the same menu all day long, lunch, dinner, and late night, or do you run different shift specials?
No, so our menu is the same menu all week long, every hour of the day. We have a Taco Tuesday special that runs from 11 a.m. until 10 p.m. And that Taco Tuesday special is the same menu. The only difference is we offer uh, more combinations for people who want to come in groups as an incentive for it being a Tuesday.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so I think we have a pretty good picture here. I'm obviously hungry now too. Thank you very much. So let's talk a little bit about your company strategy because you did an awful lot of expansion in a very short period of time. I mean, this concept didn't really start until what was it, April of 2021. And then you obviously really hit expansion hard. So let's talk about how you went from that first unit once it got operating to when did the expansion wheels get started? And how did that work with finding sites, with raising funds? Because you have, I don't know, you'll have to tell us. I think you have 20 some units, right? Just in Florida now.
Yeah. Well, after the first location, what we learned something very valuable, and that was um, second generation was key for us, right? We were able to receive the keys in February of 2021. We were open, fully operational with grand opening in May of 2021. So 3 months we were open, and that became the strategy that we utilized. The second location came 9 months later, so we found that second location in December. November of 2021 was when we got that second location, and that was our Brickell, Miami location. And I remember looking at my partner and my partners, and as I'm speaking to them, I tell them, hey, there's a location for sale in the heart of Brickell. Brickell is the most probably the most exciting and promising little city in Miami, in South. Mm-hmm. And so that was really exciting. The only problem was that it had a $293,000 sticker price added to it to be able to get the keys, right? My partners and I then decided to, okay, well, we'll come up with the funds. We actually didn't raise any money, Chris. Till today, we are debt free. We have never taken on any type of debt to fund our growth. And it's essentially been, there is no payouts for myself or for my partner. Nobody's making any money. Nobody's driving in nice cars. Everybody's going to kind of sacrifice until we reach the goals that we have. And so for almost 2 years, the idea of profit share and things like that was never really a thing. We would always reinvest the capital that we had. That was the key for us that allowed us to go from opening up 2 locations that first year to us now. I think within the last month we signed on 16 leases across the country. So it's definitely being very conservative with how you kind of spend, and being self-aware. If your goal is to expand your company, then bootstrapping it and not really taking on outside debt is probably the best route in my mind. I don't see a route in which bringing on partners who don't understand the vision and who don't really understand the culture also, and giving them power to make decisions. So that was something that we avoided, and it's worked very well for us. Today we have 30 locations across the country, and hopefully by the end of 2026, we would be opening up an additional 24 locations.
Okay, that is just phenomenal. But I want to discuss the 2 principles here. I get the very first principle, starting low, self-investment, second generation, keep the investment low, work hard, take very little so that this way you can create value in the brand and reinvest profits. Excellent principle. And I can see how that took you then from the first to the second to the third. But this last minute or so, you've been talking really big numbers like 16 leases throughout the United States, 30 locations in operation. So when did it switch from the self-funding to the we can grow really this quickly? Because you're off to the races if we're going to go say from the 30 locations to another 20 by the end of next year. Are you doing this because you've had a change maybe in investment? Did you have partners go public, or are you franchising?
Great question. We opened up a franchise program 2 years ago. We opened it up for 6 months. We awarded seven locations and ended up shutting down the franchise program. We didn't think that the value was something that we couldn't achieve ourselves, and so the franchise program was shut down shortly thereafter. This is in late 2023. But no, the strategy has not changed, Chris. Till today, we are debt free. There is no outside income. We are solely funding the growth of the company. Early on, I was the painter. I was the guy I was the plumber. I was the electrician. We would figure things out, and that's kind of how we got the restaurants built you know, from previous concepts. We would take a jerk chicken restaurant and spend $110,000 all in to introduce all of our equipment. And a lot of times, if you go to the first couple locations that we have, it's different tiles on the floor. It's got different layouts. Some are low ceiling, some are high ceiling. That was very early on, but that's because we were restricted. We really would prioritize getting open and introducing ourselves to the community over perfection, right? We didn't want to wait an additional 2 years to be able to save that $500,000 to spend on a build out. Today, we're comfortable spending a little more on those build outs and kind of getting that consistent look and feel for every restaurant you go to. But it also gives that homey feeling. It gives that homey vibe to a customer when they come in, and it's not, a lot of people don't know that people would walk into a location and think, wow, this is a great restaurant. I'm sure the grandma in the kitchen is having a great time cooking for us. And so people don't really get the feeling that this is a chain or a bigger company, right? It's more homey, it's more relaxed. Even the ambiance inside of the restaurant is it's darker. We have very nice, beautiful artwork that's glow in the dark with black lights that kind of bring out. It almost feels like you're sitting in a restaurant with a bubble around you, and the people on the table next to you can't really see every detail of you because it's darker, and that's kind of the vibe that we went for. We wanted to create that cozy, homey vibe. And to do that, it really helped us that we didn't really have that full corporate feel very early on. So we still like to keep those elements today as we grow.
I like that a lot. That's sort of what I'm hearing you say is how we can maybe have the advantages of growth, expansion, value, certain operational efficiencies, but you're keeping that all in the background because what you just assume the guest sees is uniqueness, homey, sort of the unchained chain kind of a thing. And I'm thinking of a few examples where I've seen that, and it works wonderfully. I think there is sort of a guest acceptance if they feel like something is more unique, something fits in maybe to their particular community, maybe the art, furnishings, and whatnot's a little different than when they see your brand in another city, and they go there, and of course they enjoy the food, but there's a different vibe and somewhat different feel. I think that's enjoyable. That's a very good direction.
Certainly, you go to my Orlando location, and you'll see a huge Day of the Dead themed Mickey Mouse, right? You go to each location has a touch and feel of the community that we're in to bring it home even more.
I love it. So what have you really, learned from an operational challenge, moving from city to city and now state to state? How do you overcome some of the challenges of, say, developing the team, purveyor relationships, adjusting marketing because different states, different communities might react to different specials? How are you approaching all of that?
That's a great question. I like to mention this statistic because it's actually almost unbelievable. Our employee retention rate is 92% year over year, so we don't typically lose employees. I think to go into the first point that you made, which is developing the teams. Every single one of our management team members was once a dishwasher, a line cook, a cashier. And that individual was developed and was provided with the tools to be able to grow in all aspects that are required for them to become managers. And that allows them to not only see, it allows for all of our employees to not only see a future with the company, but also kind of embrace the work today for tomorrow's result. So a lot of the locations that are on the outside the state, or even in Tampa, Orlando, our base is in South Florida, but we have locations in Concord. We're all the way in Texas as well. Those are all managers that were once residents of South Florida. They chose to pack their bags and go to these new cities and start new lives and build a new chapter with the company. So really focusing on providing an environment for the employees where they are comfortable, they understand their path to growth with the company, has allowed us to be very almost careless when it comes to opening the locations, because we just have a full list of people who are ready to jump on a plane and go. So employee morale is really, really important. I mean, just yesterday we were I myself and my partner were playing softball with 15 managers from our locations, right? We do this every Monday. They know who I am. I go into a restaurant. I'm pretty familiar with most of the employees in every restaurant. I make it a point to do so. And so that helps with building that relationship with your team members, right? They don't just feel like a number. They're more of a person who one day will become something bigger than just a line cook, or someone bigger than just a dishwasher. So that's the first point. The second thing that you mentioned was when it comes to purveyors. Man, that is one topic that is very tricky, because anywhere you go, purveyors are. It's important for people to realize, any of the listeners, that purveyors will never be on your side, right? You need to be, unfortunately, shrewd. You need to be firm in what you need and what your needs are, and understand that there is always room for negotiation with them, right? There was a time where we were paying almost $100 for a case of, say, paper bags, the to-go bags. 2 months later, and 4 phone calls of negotiations, and it was down to $42 a case, right? And it's crazy, because not many people, and I'm sure not many of your listeners will understand that, but it's real. And it's not something that just the big dogs get to participate with, right? If you have an important relationship, if that purveyor appreciates you, you will be able to. There is always room for negotiation. Do not accept the first terms that are provided by them, and always assume that this is another one of our philosophies when it comes to purveyors, is always assume that they're not coming at you with their best. And so kind of tightening the noose a little bit around them, right? It's like letting them understand that if you want our business, this is what it has to be. We've noticed that they've really were able to make sacrifices that I've never would have imagined. So,
well, there is an awful lot, I think, of fact there. I've come across it before myself with clients and listening to others here on the podcast, that as they grow and go into other markets, at first there was like fear on, are we going to be able to get the brands that we want, the quality level that we want, as we go into different markets. And they found that, yes, as you educate, that was one of the first things that I think I heard you say, your purveyor, of what your expectations are, what your needs are, and you don't vary from that. You will find the one that's willing to do that, meet your specs. As you come up with what your volume expectations are, what your acceptable price ranges are, I'm finding that a lot of, especially the larger vendors, are now, working with smaller growing companies that maybe we didn't see before. And they're working on ways, developing these prime vendor relationships where they do start working with pricing based on cost plus or negotiated price range, holding your special products in their inventory. These are all things that I heard were problems years ago when companies were growing. And it seems to be a little bit easier if you stick to your guns and keep working hard for it. So that's good. Now,
Yeah, I have one piece of advice for people when it comes for the listeners when it comes to dealing with purveyors. Um, Never settle with your first option. That is something that I think everybody should understand. Um, and if you get a better offer from a different purveyor, it's almost guaranteed that the purveyor that you want will bend and accept those terms. So, I see it so often, Chris, that and it saddens me. It really does. I see restaurateurs with one or two locations, and I look at some of the prices that they pay on certain products, and I know that when I had one or two locations, it was paying a lot less than they would pay.
hmm,
Because those restaurateurs are really focused on operations, employees, cooking, food quality, customers, and I get it. But it's really important for them to maximize the benefit that they get from their purveyors, and that is, I would say, maybe 8 out of every 10 restaurateurs that reach out to me for just guidance or people that I know myself are in that same boat. They are in contracts that are very difficult to really make money, right? So um, I don't believe that a restaurant's margins should be anywhere between 8 to 12%. That is what is nationally accepted as the figure. Um, Ours sit a little over 25%, right? And so that is not coming from and oh, by the way, just to kind of mention, you asked about the pricing in the beginning. Our pricing is for a full entree is anywhere between $11 to $13. So we're certainly not on the more expensive side of the pendulum, but we're also not on the cheap side. We're fairly priced. When it comes to specialty tacos, we are actually underpriced in comparison to our competitors. And so we haven't changed our prices since the beginning of COVID. So when we launched our first brick and mortar, our prices have been consistent. That has been because of our ability to pass that negotiation and those savings to us through our purveyors, as opposed to raising the prices to make up for it.
that's wonderful. You mentioned having, let's see, 30 locations. And I think you mentioned, although you're South Florida based, you were all over Florida and now in Texas. Um, but with your 16 different lease options in other states, what states are those? So the listeners know where they can maybe find you pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're currently open in Florida, Georgia, New York, DC, North Carolina, and Texas. We are taking on leases in Massachusetts, specifically in Boston, more locations in DC, more locations in Texas, locations in Nashville, and also expanding the New York market a little more, expanding the North Carolina market a little more.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent. Boy, those are great markets to be in. And the listeners who are, of course, currently in those markets know that fairly soon they might be able to get a talking taco in their area pretty soon. What we haven't talked about yet, but you and I both know is a very, very recent pleasure, was your expansion outside the country. You want to spend a little bit and talk about how that came about. To go that far from home this soon in a company's life is not something that we see a lot. And maybe you could explain the process of the operating partnership and where it is. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, certainly. So we have for a couple of years now looked into the Middle East in specific. There are certain markets in the Middle East that we believe are excellent markets, and some of those are probably very predictable, and some you might look at me and be like, "Are you kidding me?" But the predictable ones are there are certain areas in Dubai, understood. Qatar, those are countries that are very touristy, and there are areas that a good chunk of those inhabitants of that area are Americans and people who are tourists there. Um, the other country is Jordan. Jordan has, I like to say, I like to tell this joke that there's literally nothing to do in Jordan but to eat, right? And so it's like everything there is food, and great food at that. And it kind of forces you to be the best that you could be because the competition there is insane. Um, so those are key markets that we're looking into. We have identified, uh, once again, managers from our U.S. locations that are willing to travel and train and live and start a life in those countries that would have been here their whole lives. And so we're not necessarily making any partnerships with food groups.
Okay.
We are trying our best to stick to that corporate control over our locations and being able to um, kind of have the necessary say that we need to be able to operate at that level.
Are any locations open now?
In the Middle East, no. In the
Okay.
Middle East, no. We will have some open by the second quarter of 2027. Um, these things. It's a new ball game, Chris, and it's going to take us some time to make sure that we set up our teams correctly.
I would think so. No, I would think so. That's why I mentioned, for a company that is relatively young and in this stage of growth to already have time and effort, space so far away is unusual. But I agree with you. Some of those markets are very fruitful, and there has been a tremendous amount of success from, say, other, casual and counter service, fast casual concepts developed in America, well known in America, and then jumped that far away and are really well accepted. So I wish that for you as well.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
So getting back to some of the current industry challenges with all of the growth that you have on the table, how are you taking a look at what I know some people are complaining about, and that's this unbelievable increase in occupancy costs? It seems like everybody in the country except landlords got the memo that we have to be sort of careful and frugal, and rents are high. Are you finding that with the amount of leases that you have out there and the expansion that you have on the table?
Chris, the rents are, as you said, unbelievably, ridiculously expensive. Our occupancy costs were close to $35 a square foot for the better part of 2.5 years. I'm looking at our internal data now, and I see that the mediocre areas are trading at between $60 to $80 a square foot in our south, and this is South Florida, right? And it's even more expensive. We have locations where, to renew a lease, landlords requested over $200 a square foot. We're blessed in that we have high AUVs to begin with that can absorb a good amount of those increased occupancy costs. Right now, our AUV sits just under 3.9 million, and so our occupancy costs are typically less than 4 to 5%, and as they fluctuate from location to location, we do see that some locations that are underperformers really, those occupancy costs eat away at any profit margin that would be available. But at times, I also think that you don't want to cut corners when it comes to site selection. And if it means paying a little extra, unfortunately, it's the world that we live in today, and it's the scenario that we're put in. But I do think that if an area warrants that rent, we would certainly take it on and not just move to even down the street if it wasn't as great of an area for half the rent, right? We're willing to pay that little extra to make sure that we are in the best location possible for success.
And that's a well-made point. And it didn't take me very long, in my career to realize that there are many things an operator can work with. We can work and modify things like menu after we're open. We can change people. We can realign management. The one thing you don't really ever have the ability to change after you're open is where you are. So, yeah, you have to be that concerned about the location, making sure that it meets your customer profile. It's got the right demographic. It meets all of your site specifications. It's just a shame that in order to do all of that, people are paying, much more than they've been budgeting in the past few years. Are there any other, say, cost concerns? We're living in a time where we're constantly hearing that there is a threat to our, business by high operating costs, labor shortage, and in addition to that, continued cost of goods increasing. With all of the expansion that you have planned, how does that fit within your strategy?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest costs in any operation is the cost of employment. What is it costing for us to hire the people and keep them employed? We have so historically in Florida up until a year ago, minimum wage was roughly $8.50. We have never had an employee make less than $15 since we've opened. And so we were always for paying more than the market near us and around us, for various reasons. Number one, employee retention, but number two, it's we believe in providing those livable wages for our employees. And so that for us, we didn't really feel that big of an impact. I think today our average employee gets $18 an hour, the average employee across the company, and this is line cooks, dishwashers, this is across the whole spectrum, and minimum wage here is $11. So we don't necessarily have an issue when it comes to that. That has already been pre-programmed into our operation. I think food cost and the cost of paper goods has been skyrocketing. Yeah. There came a time where we were losing on our guacamole because of how expensive avocados got, right? The truth is there are certain things that we can control and certain things that we can't. I believe 80% of the things that we can control, if you're able to modify those, you should still be good in terms of your bottom line profitability. We've taken steps to source all of our paper products from the States, right? So all of our paper products are made here in the United States. Previously, they were all made in China and India. And that was through our purveyor, Gordon Food Services. So we would pay Gordon Food Services and they would contract and get it done in those countries. We're getting it made for cheaper here in the United States, right?
That's interesting to hear.
Yeah. And so, but again, it goes down to somebody else can go to the same purveyor here that I went to and get double the price that I got. It's not about, it does help, in the sense that we are growing and a purveyor, paper goods supplier can see that, that expansion and be incentivized to kind of give us a better price. I could see that perspective, but I've also seen individuals with restaurateurs with one or two locations get very similar prices to me. So not necessarily just crawling into a shell and rolling over and saying, okay, the world is going to be kind of messed up to me and the conditions are hard. I think there's still a battle to be won, and there's still, customers to sell to, and there's still money to be made at the end of the day.
And that's a great ending point. I couldn't say it better myself. There's challenges out there. you know of them, you have a great grasp of them, and you're meeting them head on. You can overcome the issues. You can still grow. It is a monstrous business when we consider, the fact that in all areas of food service, we employ, more people than there are currently out there building cars, making homes. Drilling for oil, and there are customers to serve. Seems like dining out isn't really the luxury that maybe years ago we said it is. It's just part of our social fabric. You're serving a great need. Your concept sounds incredible. You guys were off to a good start, and not only a good start, but your expansion has got a tremendous amount of promise. Love the areas that you're in. And I wish you nothing but the best for your expansion within those areas and the new ones that you're going to. Mohammad, this has been a ton of fun. I'd love to talk to you further, but we are running out of time. So listen, people, everyone, if you don't have a Talkin' Tacos in your area, it sounds like one is coming shortly. In the meantime, go to the website, go to Talkin' Tacos, read about this, a concept that's doing a lot right. Very proud of the numbers that you're running. Your commitment to staff, community, and the way you're able to manage the challenges of the industry. Keep it up, sir. Thank you so much, Mo, for joining us today on Corner Booth.
Thank you for your time, Chris. I appreciate it.
And for everyone else, go out and make it a great shift. And I hope we can cross up really quickly on another Corner Booth one day soon.
Thank you for joining us on the Corner Booth. We'll be back next Tuesday with more inspiration, insights, and industry best practices to help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.